Hi, this is part one of a video on integrating your sources into your research writing. And today we're going to be talking about in-text citations. But first, I just want to cover a couple basics of just citing your sources in general. First thing to note is when do you need to cite your sources? And the quick answer is anytime you use information or ideas that are not your own. The only exception to that being widely common knowledge. For example, Barack Obama is the President of the United States. That's common knowledge. You don't need to cite that. Next question, how do you cite your sources? In academia and in most scholarly research, you use a standardized citation style, such as APA, MLA, or Chicago and Turabian, which are sort of interchangeable. Which one you use will be mostly based on your specific assignment. So if it's not highlighted in the assignment instructions, your first step is to probably ask your instructor. Generally, citation styles are paired with a broad discipline. For example, APA mostly applies to the social sciences. MLA is used primarily in the humanities, and Chicago Turabian is oftentimes used in history. And there's other styles as well. I'm not going to show it in this video, but from the library's homepage, in the upper middle part, there's a link that says Cite Your Sources, and that contains links to style guidelines for each of these styles, as well as other tools you can use to help you in citing sources generally in your writing. Now, here's a very common thing that happens. You have a source in hand that you found and you want to use in your paper, but it doesn't fit in the examples in the guide. Say we'll say APA in the APA style guide. It doesn't fit exactly into any of the examples in that guide. What do? What happens? Well, the short answer is you need to basically make a choice. You choose the one that seems like it's the closest fit and apply those guidelines to what you have in hand or in print or on your screen. So, they can't provide examples for every possible permutation, so sometimes you just have to make a choice and make a best effort to provide as much information to ensure that your readers can find that source if they so choose. Now, citations themselves consist of two parts within any research paper. The first part is the in-text citation. It's the information that's actually within the paper that usually consists of the author name, last name, the date of publication, and if applicable, the page number. And we'll talk in a minute about how to do that in specific. Now, the second part of a citation, which we're not going to go into detail in this video, is the end of text citation, or the references or the works cited, depending on what style guide you're using. That in-text citation, which is in reality just a briefer version of the full citation at the end of your work, so that in-text citation points your reader to the works cited, the full list at the end of your paper. Now, last thing is, of course, if you don't cite all your sources, both in text and at the end of your paper, that is considered plagiarism. Whether it's accidental or not, it can be considered plagiarism and get you in trouble at Empire State College. So you want to check those things and be as careful as you can when you're citing sources, etc. So let's talk about in-text citations in detail. How to, as seamlessly as possible, integrate those sources that you're going to be using to back up the arguments in your paper so that your reader can follow the flow of your arguments. So, in-text citations themselves, which are half of the elements of a citation, themselves consist of two elements. The first is the information itself, either a quote, a direct quote, or a paraphrase, and we'll talk about paraphrasing in a subsequent video. And then the second part is that brief citation information, the author, last name, the year, and if applicable, the page number. Now, within that, there are two ways to create an in-text citation. The first is to simply have the information, for example, if you have a direct quote, and then immediately following that quote in the text, in parentheses, put that citation information. Now that is the sort of traditional way to do it, but I'm going to argue that there is a better way to do it in a lot of situations. And that is, and well, actually first, before that, I just want to show you an example of that traditional citation method. So this says the number of teenage heroin addicts in New York is estimated to be 100,000. And I made up this quote. I said Cuomo 2015 from page 12 of some document. That would be the traditional way. Now the second way to do it is to introduce or contextualize the information with the author name and the year prior to the quote or the paraphrase. And then, if applicable, you just have the page number at the end. And if there's no page number, for example, if you're using an ebook with no page numbers or a web page, there's nothing that comes at the end. Now let's look at an example of this. So this is the same quote as above, but in this one, we're giving that author and date information up front. It gives the reader some information to be able to process the quote or the paraphrase. So in this instance, it says Cuomo 2015 stated that the number of teenage heroin addicts in New York is estimated to be 100,000. And then at the end, page 12. That's APA style. So if you think about it, that second method of in-text citing gives your reader more context. So rather than just sort of plopping down a quote or a paraphrase and letting your reader try and figure out, okay, is this the author saying this or is this someone else? You give them that information up front. Okay, so let's look at a couple more examples before we close out. So right here is sort of a generic traditional method of in-text citation, and then you have another example of that second method, which is using what's called a signal phrase. You signal to your reader that an outside information source is coming by doing three things. You have the author last name, and then usually in parentheses the date of publication. Then you have a verb. It can be anything like states or writes or opines or what have you. And then you have either the quote or the paraphrase. And then, of course, at the end, a page number if applicable. Now, notice that that second method is, in addition to giving some context to your reader, it's just generally easier to read and understand and just flows better. It allows you in your own writing to leverage that source information a little more strongly. Okay? So let's use a couple more examples. And this is using paraphrasing, which we'll cover in the next video, so don't worry about that right now. But hopefully you can see that using this sort of signal phrasing, in other words, chunking up the in-text citation a little bit and giving some context to it, really gives you some flexibility to use the sources in better ways. Okay, so these are just two examples of that. And especially if your reader knows something about the authors and has some the date might be important, using this second in-text citation method can be a very powerful way to do research writing. So that's it. That is in-text citing.